Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. I've been asked to talk today about relevance in management education. Let me say from the outset, I mean by that both teaching or learning and research. And I really can't talk about relevance without talking about its partner, excellence. So, it's often said there's nothing as practical as a good theory. What is not said is what kind of theory that is. Is this a theory discipline-based, in other words, coming from theory to practice, or is it the other way around? Is it a theory of practice, which is really what we're talking about when we talk about relevance? So anyway, there are two questions here about excellence and relevance. Let me start by trying to define these two. Relevance, I think, has four dimensions. It's relevance to practice, of course. It's relevant to the local markets in which the schools are operating. Whatever may be relevant in New York is not necessarily relevant in Addis Ababa, for example. So it has to be relevant to the markets in which the school is operating. It has to be relevant today and tomorrow, not yesterday. It could be yesterday if yesterday is also relevant tomorrow, but it has to be relevant for the future. And lastly, it has to be relevant not just for the business, the company, but for society. Excellence is a measuring stick. Excellence is relative to some best practice or some standard. It is a different concept. I like to define it as among the best in class. So, whatever that class of schools is that we're talking about, and we're talking here about relevant schools, schools that are relevant, to be excellent, you have to be among the best in class of those schools. Let me say now a word about relevance in teaching and then relevance in research. Relevance in teaching is not so easy to measure because we can look at teaching itself, of course, and we ask the four questions that I've just asked, but we have to really also look at outcomes. Is it having impact of some sort on careers, on practice, on the people who are going to use this education? It has to have the right kind of inputs upstream. It has to be a school which is well networked with practice, with companies and with executives. It has to have a leadership and a governance system that is tuned into practice. It has to have a series of functional activities, particularly marketing, and I would say human resources, which value and honor practice. It has to have processes in place which encourage practice, particularly innovation. And among the most important, there have to be promotion criteria for professors that reflect this interest in relevance. It's many schools are in a way speaking with a forked tongue. They talk about relevance, honor relevance, and when it comes to promotions, they are using other criteria, nothing to do with relevance. Rather, articles in research journals which are not relevant. So it has to be consistent all the way through. And lastly, of course, we have to have resources, faculty themselves, classrooms that encourage the discussion of issues. Horseshoe is a very good shape, not only, but it's one of the things. And we have to have the kind of students who also are interested in relevance. So student admissions are important. A similar list for research. It has to do with both content, like teaching, the content, the curricula in teaching, but what is the content of the research? Is the content relevant to practice? And it has to do with the process. Relevant research often uses much smaller samples because we're trying to get to the heart of frameworks, of ways to look at problems, rather than to test theory per se. And again, we have to have outcomes, we have to have impact from the research, we have to have the research read by managers, and so on. But the same list that we looked at for teaching. When it comes to excellence, which I like to look at second, once the school is relevant and in that class, is it up to scratch? We're looking for schools that do the right things right. So this is the excellence story. Let me say, it's easy to talk about. It's much more difficult to put into practice. So, the real story is how to go from where you are now, if you're not as relevant as you would like to be, or as excellent as you would like to be, how to get from here to there. This is a journey. It's not something that takes place overnight. So, CEEMAN has some help. Desks for these things has some help in place. One, of course, is the IMTA, This is absolutely devoted to teaching and research of relevance and excellence. And I run a seminar called Leading the Way. It's a workshop which helps schools to actually make the transition from where they are now towards more excellent and relevant teaching. And of course, this is the basis for our accreditation system. We're looking for these two, and we're accrediting schools which we think are measuring up on both of these standards. So that's a very short and brief introduction to both relevance and to excellence. We very much hope, we believe in these two, and we hope you can start making that journey if you haven't started already. Thank you very much.